Next thing to consider is augmented chords. So normally we have either a major triad or a minor triad, where we're going to the major third and the fifth in the triad, or we're going to the minor third and the fifth. We can also have an augmented triad, which is where I want that to be a G sharp, where we have a major third and a raised fifth. It has a, how to describe it? It has a very forward-leaning, bright, but bright in almost kind of a menacing way. It's kind of an intense chord. You're not going to hear it a lot in your general pop music, with a few exceptions, but generally it's not used that much in our Muggle world, and that's part of what makes it special. Also, what makes it special is it's built of these two major thirds. It's almost like a chromatic median in itself, right? That it's got this major third on the bottom and this major third on the top. So that sound is pretty mysterious and wizardly, right? And you can also consider that you could have it with a major seventh, or with a, let me make that whole note, or with the minor seventh. Again, I want to make this a G sharp. Now with the minor seventh, we're actually borrowing from the whole tone scale, and we're going to get more into scales in the part on melody, but just something to keep in mind. So we get this very, if we had that, definitely mysterious and odd and suspenseful. Something is going on there. So augmented chords are an interesting color that we don't really hear a lot, and also they can be used to chromatically move from other places. For example, we could start with an A minor chord and then move that to the augmented. So all that's moved, let's change this again. All that's moved is that one pitch, back to that idea of keeping some sort of ground consistent pitch. Now that gives us a little bit of that kind of sneaking quality of magic, right? Where things are elusive and kind of slipping and not quite what they seem, not quite what you were expecting. The other thing we can do with augmented chords is treat them kind of like a dominant chord that will pull or resolve into a certain place. For example, this C augmented chord, which just insists on giving me that A flat. The C augmented chord could be considered the 5 chord of the key of F, because a C wants to pull into F. So we could also have that C augmented pull into the F too. So notice that the E goes by half step up to the F, the G sharp goes by half step up to the A, and the C stays the same. That to me has a bit of an old-timey kind of turn of the 19th, 20th century sound to it. I guess it's kind of like late romantic music using that kind of chromaticism. So I think in a lot of cases in our magic style, the augmented chords are not being used just as passing to get us somewhere else, but they're being kind of the sound. That's kind of more of the world we're going to be living in. Is like, whoa, this is a weird sound. This is pretty freaky. The other kind of chord that you're probably familiar with, the other available triad that is not major, minor, or augmented, is the diminished. So let's grab a new page here. Again, our typical major chord is this guy. Typical minor chord, minor chord. Now the diminished looks like this. It's a minor third stacked with another minor third. Again, this diminished chord is almost kind of like a self-contained chromatic median in a way, right? That we have the minor third stacked on top of the minor third. So similar to the augmented chord, it's an otherworldly, less commonly used sound. A lot of times when it is commonly used, it's used to pull into another chord. We get that resolution into it. An important part of a diminished chord is, of course, this tritone between the root and the flatted fifth. And a lot of times you want that tritone to resolve either inward, where the C will go up and the G flat will go down, or if you consider the chord more, if we consider the tritone more like this with an F sharp, we'll actually have it resolve outward. So the F sharp goes up and the C goes down. So that's actually part of the magic, of diminished chords, is this ambiguity of that tritone, that's telling us, you know, this could be the C and the F sharp that wants to go out, could be the C and G flat that wants to go in. It could go either way. So all of a sudden we've gone from this chord to G major, and it makes perfect sense. Or you can go from this chord to D flat major, and it makes sense there too. So you can play with that. You can play with the expectations of the tritone and the kind of polarity that you can flip on either side of that, and you end up in keys a tritone apart as well, the G or the D flat. So again, diminished chords are another place that have kind of a strange sound to them and can also give us ambiguity and some unexpectedness. And similar to how we had the A minor go to the C augmented, we could have an A minor go to an A diminished, keeping the common tones but letting one of the tones can be slippery by a chromatic. Again, we'll talk about that more in the melody section. One last thing I want to talk about with the diminished chords is the sevenths. So the triad, as we saw, was this guy, and you could have a diminished major seventh in theory, I guess. In practice, probably not all that much, so don't worry about that one. But you could have either the minor seventh or the diminished seventh. Now I'm going to change that to a G flat. So really what this should be is a B double flat, although I'm not going to bother with how to put that there. So the fully diminished is here, where the seventh is even diminished. Technically it's a major sixth, but it's a diminished seventh, which means it was like brought even lower than minor all the way to diminished. Or you can have the half diminished seventh, also called a minor 7 flat 5, because it's like a minor 7 chord, but then you flat the 5. The minor 7 flat 5 is a bit of a jazzier chord. It's often part of a 2-5-1 pattern in a minor key. The fully diminished is that much darker and more kind of fluid sound, although a little old-fashioned sounding in my opinion. So I don't use them all that much, but again, just important to realize that not only are there the triads, there's also a few different flavors of the seventh as well.